really, really hard and you execute your system, and that's what it's all about. Yes,
there
sir. Trust.
He's pretty big trust.
Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir.
Right on cue. Hey, right on cue. Hey, let me.
It's the Jumbo Set Podcast, presented as always by Jimmy's Famous Seafood. My name is Jake Louque, and I'm joined by my Tim Hortons loving brother from another mother. Up north, it is Cole effing Jackson. How are we doing tonight, pal?
Oh, man, what a day. What a day. What a rough day. Every day feels rough in this fan base right now. But, seeing it's week 5, and we already have the CVS receipt of an injury report, so it felt like 2021 towards the end of the season, 2020 COVID game vibes. That was tough. It was tough to see that, especially with kind of Linderbaum and Hamilton being a little bit a big shock, I guess, kind of out of nowhere. But I can't believe we're in this spot right now. Like it's tough.
It seems out of nowhere, but then it just kind of feels like it's been slowly building and percolating. Obviously, go back all the way to Ricard and Likely in the summer. It's extended, obviously, now to Justin Madubuike, who I haven't been on the show discussing the fact that he is, in fact, going to be out for the year. Further speculation about his career is running abound because John Harbaugh did not necessarily quash the idea that this could be it, and he's going to leave that up to Madubuike to address. But yeah, getting right into it, today is Wednesday, October 1st. As of that, your injury report heading into week 5. Cornerback Chidobe Awuzie, hamstring, did not practice. Safety Kyle Hamilton, groin, limited. I've been limited with my groin before. Cornerback Marlon Humphrey, calf, did not practice. Lamar Jackson, hamstring, did not practice. Emory Jones actually returns to practice. He's still limited with a shoulder, but his 21-day window is open, so he's going to start practicing. We're not going to see him for a couple of weeks at least. Travis Jones with a knee was limited. That continues from last week. Tyler Linderbaum with a calf. You hinted at that. Limited. Patrick Ricard, calf, did not practice. So we're still dealing with that. Roquan Smith, hamstring, did not practice. It's already been announced he's going to miss a couple of weeks. Ronnie Stanley, ankle, did not practice. Brent Urban, finger, limited. Kyle Van Noy, hamstring, limited. Wide receiver Devontae Walker added today with an oblique, did not practice. Cornerback Nate Wiggins, elbow, did not practice. Just an all-timer John Harbaugh today. Why don't we just talk about it tomorrow? What are we doing here? I love that from John. He's getting a little testy, getting a little fiery. He says he is concerned but not overwhelmed. But I don't know. It feels like he's feeling the heat here a little bit.
What a bizarre week. Kind of the weird Todd Monken roasting that kind of felt out of nowhere. Not John-like, right? John's not acting like John. It's kind of maybe he's just getting old and senile, but I've been saying it since week 2. The vibe around this team is just off. Like, I can't remember the last time, and we've kind of talked about it, me, you, and Spenny. Like, they've obviously had blips of games where they just don't show up right during the regular season. Like, we've seen it before. I mean, it happens in every organization. But the beauty of John Harbaugh's coaching is you rarely see it 2 weeks in a row. And that's why I think I was so taken aback, so shocked by the performance last week, just to see them so disinterested. And it got me thinking. I tried to do a little introspection. I was like, why am I so mad with this football team? And, it kind of took me back to my roots of how I became a Baltimore Ravens fan. I grew up in a small blue collar Eastern Ontario town that is a junior hockey town. And, what attracted me to the Ravens becoming from a hockey family was just their style of play. It was rough and tumble. It was, even through the dark days, they weren't the most skilled team, but when you played the Baltimore Ravens, you were leaving there with black and blue. It didn't matter. They played physical football. It's just what drew me to the team. And I think what's been bothering me so much is how goddamn soft this team looks the last 2 weeks. Like, they look soft. Last 3 weeks, honestly, the whole season. Getting beat up in the trenches, the run game getting kind of blown up starting in the fourth quarter of the Bills game. Like, that's not Baltimore Ravens football. And that's what I think has really gotten to me, because this team doesn't have an identity right now. Like, there's nothing really to hang their hat on. There's nothing that, if I asked you right now, what do they do particularly good? The answer would probably be generate explosive plays, but that's not an identity. That's really kind of a loser's identity, you know, to kind of get beat up for 4 quarters, but yeah, you can splash some long ones. That's essentially who they've been through 4 weeks. You know, they've had, if you go through some of their touchdowns, you know, the long one to Devontae, Henry's big rush, and a couple touchdowns in the Bills game. Like, it's kind of been all built on explosive plays. And this team used to be a team that could kind of clench up, play some tough defense, run the ball, control the clock. You know, that they had an identity to lean back on. And right now they don't have that.
Yeah, it just feels like I was turning this over in my head a little bit too. It feels like they bet big on continuity. And that is so far a gamble that they are losing. I think they thought that their defensive line would be anchored by Justin Madubuike and Travis Jones. And obviously with their injuries and everything, that's not going to help. But you lose Michael Pierce, you don't really effectively replace him, in my opinion. Particularly, I think we're seeing it on the offensive line where, and hey, this might have been a fair gamble to take. This might have been a fair line of thinking where you tragically lose your offensive line coach ahead of last season. And listen, they got off to a rough start last year, but Warhop and that crew put things together and they were looking like a pretty good unit down the stretch. And listen, maybe it was smoke and mirrors, maybe it was X, Y, or Z, but it just felt like, hey, we've got that in place now. And you and I and Spenny and a lot of people have talked about the frustrations that they really do not seem to value the guard position. I think their hubris might have gotten to an all-time high with it, to what they were running out there last year. And you add on the fact that Patrick McCary walks out the door. And all of a sudden, things are looking pretty rough, where you've got this just weird Daniel Falele experiment continuing. Got Andrew Voorhees, so I think he's actually had some bright spots, particularly in the run game so far this season, but he just does not look ready for prime time. Roger Rosengarten has not taken the step that you would have hoped. And now, listen, you've got Ronnie Stanley, who does not have a clean injury history, let's just say. He's dealing with that a little bit, and he's probably going to show his age a little bit earlier than he would have expected if he hadn't had the catastrophic ankle injury. Linderbaum seems to be feeling the effects, to the points that you've made in our chats offline, of dealing with that kind of inexperienced and frankly ineffective play to both of his sides. And it just felt like, hey, man, we made it work last season. We've got that in place. Now let's go sign a DeAndre Hopkins and let's draft a couple of guys. Let's draft a Malachi Starks and a Mike Green, who it may well work out. It may well work out for them in the long term, but they haven't exactly been lighting the world on fire. And I think especially with Green, you would have thought, hey, that would be a guy that would come in, and this is the first big, character risk that we're going to take a shot at. And we're going to have him, we're going to plug him in, and he's going to be our sack production guy. And Owe is going to continue his sack production. You've gotten really, literally nothing out of those guys in terms of sack production so far this year. And I didn't even get to watch that much of the game on Sunday, is the funny thing. I was at a music festival. So I didn't miss much, but what I did see of it, I was kind of trying to stream it, and then eventually it started to get out of hand. I was like, all right, I'm just going to go watch like Modest Mouse and like not worry about this, which was the right decision. But I also felt like, man, if they were in a different spot, I might have prioritized it a little bit more. I would have found like a TV or something that I could kind of half pay attention, or I would have like found a way to figure it out. I just kind of, if they're going to be this checked out, what the fuck do I owe them to tune into this kind of thing? And overall, man, we're going to get into it too, but going forward, and I think Spenny was just tweeting about this. I think he's flying back tomorrow.
Yeah.
So he'll get on here and talk about it as well. But man, this is it for John Harbaugh. And like, this is the whole thing with John Harbaugh. And I think a lot of people have criticized him over the years, I think rightly and maybe a little unfairly, but at this point, like it's all laid bare. This is what you are here for. You are a floor raising, program building, motivating type coach. He is a little more involved in X's and O's than I think the harsh critics would like to throw out there, but this is what you're supposed to be, man. You're supposed to be the guy that raises the floor. You're supposed to be the guy that's going to have these guys, no matter who it is out there, playing hard for you. And the last 2 games and a half, I would say, maybe even the entire Detroit game, you could say, they have looked disinterested. They have looked defeated. They have looked mentally soft. They have looked psychologically broken, probably part and parcel with some of these big game losses that we've seen them take and some of the national narrative that has started to develop around them. But it might even go deeper than that, because who knows how much these guys are even paying attention to that stuff. It just feels like there's a general disinterest, dispassion, and it's not fun to watch. and it's not really that fun to talk about, but overall, it's sink or swim for John Harbaugh right now. Are you going to raise this floor, or is this going to be it? Because if you can't do it, then you got to go find somebody else that is going to at least be able to put a floor in place and then try to raise the ceiling, which he hasn't been able to do either in this new era.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because we're going to get an opportunity here to kind of delineate between the Jimmies and Joes and the X's and O's. And what I mean by that is if the issue is that guys like Marlon, guys like Roquan, who are getting a lot of heat right now, are just not showing up. And then you get someone like, you know, a Jay Higgins in there, a TJ Tampa in there that are kind of your depth players. And let's say they start playing with a little bit more fire and you start to see something, makes you really wonder if it's, you know, was it the coach? Was it the players? That's not necessarily to exonerate John Harbaugh, because some of the issues with Harbaugh really come down to coaching decisions. Like, to be honest, when he went on his soliloquy about Todd Monken, I was snapping. Like, John, you have a headset on, bro. Like, if you have an issue with the protections being called, if you have an issue with the fourth down play calling, you can hear everything being said. If you want that ball to go to Derrick Henry in the first half, call a timeout. If you just heard a pass play get called, like that was inexcusable. Like, you cannot blame your offensive coordinator and completely take yourself out of the picture. That's completely unacceptable to me. So, but all that to say is that I do think there's some issues with the players. Like, Marlon Humphrey has not looked himself. As far as I know, before Sunday, he wasn't dealing with an injury. He just doesn't look like he's prepared. And I know a lot of people are kind of saying it's the scheme. He's not put in a position to succeed, but I mean,
there's other stuff about him too. Maybe he's a little distracted. He's trying to grow his media career.
Well, like you gotta, it comes like, honestly,
I'm just kidding about that. I don't actually care about that, but I do think it's just very funny to see him in like like the towel on the head after the game, looking like some sort of convent figure, ranting about cheese noodles after getting your dick kicked in as a collective team. But just
the dude that tweeted like, "Come get unready with me," as I just got embarrassed by Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, it's like, what are you doing? Like, read the room. And you know, I do think, I don't really care if these guys are going to focus on media. Like, it's like you and I, we go to work 9 to 5 and then we come home and do this. Like, like, that's fine. But if I am fucking up at work and then I'm coming on and being silly on a podcast, people at work might be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's kind of where that's why, like, when I tweeted read the room last week, it was like, if he had showed up to that podcast and was just kind of like real with us, like, you know, kind of gave us a little bit of insight into, you know, maybe why he played poorly or how did Amon-Ra St. I would have been really into hearing that. But he's just kind of like, oh, like, you know, like, kind of got beat. Like, it's just like, you look silly. It looks like you don't give a shit. So why are fans going to think anything else, right? So I'm not usually one to kind of hammer players for that, because I do think building a post-media career, like, we've seen a lot of guys go on to be very successful. I think it's important. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. They're kind of on their own time, but don't be surprised if fans are going to judge you if you just played poorly. All that to say, but the other thing that you hit on that I don't think is getting enough attention, and that's how much some of this falls at the feet of Eric DaCosta. And I find EDC's kind of been insulated a little bit from all this. Like, we've been talking about the trend. Like, how many times have we got on a pre-draft show and we're like, just got to, you know, build up the offensive line, get a pass rusher in here, you know, really fortify the trenches. Like, we talk.
And how many times do they say that at the Liars?
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's every year. Like, and to be fair, it used to be edge rusher, offensive line, wide receiver, and they've kind of solved the wide receiver thing. Like, I feel good. I don't think anybody's complaining about our wide receiver room for the first time since 2012, which is nice. But, you know, his strategy, and this isn't just new, like, he's been doing this since like the Marcus Peters trade back in 2019. Like, it's been to invest in the secondary and basically moneyball your trenches. They've moneyballed the guard position. They've moneyballed the edge rusher position. They've mostly kind of moneyballed the interior defensive line position. Matabike was obviously a huge contract and a draft pick that was clearly a hit. But you know, you go through some of the draft picks, like a lot, like Nate Wiggins, Malachi Starks, back-to-back first into your secondary. Your secondary through 10 weeks in the last 2 years is bottom of the barrel. And, everybody talks about the bounce back last year, but then you go look and kind of the average offensive rank in those last 8 weeks or whatever it was like, 23rd in the league. So it's not like they got their standing up, and obviously they played a lot cleaner, but they weren't doing it against top offenses. So you got to factor that in as well. So it's just, it's one of those things where like he hasn't hit on an edge rusher position in 4 drafts, and everybody's focusing on Mike Green right now, but he didn't hit on Odafe Oweh. He didn't hit on David Ajabo. He didn't hit on Adisa Isaac. Those are the guys that are supposed to be stepping up right now. We shouldn't have to be looking at Mike Green and being like, we need double-digit sacks out of you, bro. Like, I don't think that's a fair expectation. It's those previous draft misses at the edge rusher position that's killing them now. They've put a lot of draft capital into the edge rusher position. The problem is they haven't hit, right? So how much of that has to be owned by Eric DeCosta?
Yeah, and not uncontroversial picks at the time either. Green, obviously,
for
much different
They're
reasons.
The kings of getting like an A- on draft day, right? It's like every time it's like, oh, the Baltimore Ravens do it again. How did they find all this value?
But I was even saying, like with the Owe thing, like it was not unremarked upon, no sacks in college, and then what are we dealing with? And it's very much like simplifying it, but yeah, you're right. And this is probably what Eric is coasting on, is the fact that they do hit on draft picks pretty frequently, especially at the top. So that's where you kind of get that sort of like a draft grade. Oh, they always do this right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, when you're not hitting on an Adisa Isaac in the 3rd round, or if you go all the way back to Ozzie with like a Tim Williams, it's like, man, they just haven't been able to crack that code of pass rusher really since Suggs left. And that's just like, that is an indictment on DeCosta. I tend to give him a little bit more of a pass here on this situation. I think you're right that this team is built a little strangely, and it's probably not built in the way of the identity that you're talking about, of this kind of smash mouth, old school Baltimore Ravens stuff. But what I'd say to that is, philosophically, it almost feels like they have been that way for almost the better throughout this Lamar Jackson era. It feels like we're going to go a little bit more in on the offensive side of the ball than Ozzie used to. We're going to get this smash mouth rushing attack. And then obviously the last several years, the passing attack has sort of taken that mantle. But what also, I think, defined this era for the better was the 4th down aggression. And again, I didn't watch much of the game, but there was a controversial no-go situation with Harbaugh. Yep. Had a few of those this year. You look back to the end of the Bills game where you could have effectively won the game if you convert 3 yards there on 4th down, or just call a better, set of plays in the lead up to that. John, again, you have a headset, you get a help there. And it just feels like there is an incongruence with who they actually are and who they think they are. And that's probably part and parcel with the roster building. But I also think it's, again, man, I'm just going to keep bringing up the floor thing with Harbaugh. Like, that's the guy he's supposed to be. He's supposed to raise the floor. He's supposed to cover up for maybe some of the flaws you have, maybe some of the weaknesses. And even when he's not actively hurting you on game day right now, which I don't even think he's been that bad of throughout the course of the season, but he's definitely had his mistakes. Even when he's not doing that, I'm not necessarily seeing the floor being raised with some of these players that you need to be getting these things out of. So you talk about like a Mike Green, you talk about an Owe. I think part of that also comes back to coaching too. Like Chuck Smith, the pass rush guru. Like where are you at, man? What's going on with these guys? Why are they not able to get pressure with 4? Why are they not able to sack quarterbacks? I mean, we're not even talking about, you can't get a sack on Josh Allen. You can't get a sack on Mahomes. That's, obviously that's tough to do. And it's something that you really try to drill into in these preview shows that you do before you play a quarterback like that. But at this point, it's like, you're not even getting it on Jared Goff. You weren't even really getting it on Joe Flacco, who's like pretty immobile at this point. And it's just
terrible offensive tackles too. Like I was like, this is a game where we should be teeing off, and we didn't at all. Like it was depressing. Yeah, no. And the Lions in particular, I mean, that was a young offensive line. You want to talk about an example of a program with Dan Campbell. They have an identity. He got, I think, excoriated a little bit in the media for the biting kneecap shit. But guess what? He went out there and he delivered. He built that program. Those guys all rally around him. They play for him. They're aggressive on 4th down. They're strong in their play calling. And I don't know. I'm not going to I think you're spot on with Harbaugh criticizing Monken, like, especially within the context of your young defensive coordinator, who, I'll go back to the organizational hubris word. You had a hotshot young defensive coordinator that you groomed through the system in Mike McDonald for a long time. And then you hire him away from Michigan after his sort of whatever you want to call it when he was there. And then he's amazing for 2 years, and then he's gone. And then I think maybe John just thought, hey, let's just do that again.
Let's just hire another young guy who's come up in the ranks. Yeah, exactly. The whiz kid that we know and like. And Zach Orr does seem like a great guy, like nothing personal against him. But man, if John's going to go out there and turn the guns on Todd Monken like that, who I think has been unequivocally the best coach on this staff, top to bottom, throughout probably his entire tenure here. That's just that's some loser shit. And he might say, oh, well, I was really just talking about all of us. Of course, I'm a part of that. Okay, but I didn't really hear him couch it like that, so I'll throw it back in his face. And like, I don't know, man. It just feels like there's a bit of an abdication of leadership there that is really disappointing from a guy who I usually think is pretty stand up in those moments.
I find it interesting too with John. Like someone put it in the chat, John or Gene, whatever we want to call it. We saw Belichick get fired from New England after such a insane run. You saw Doug Peterson get fired after two years after they won a Super Bowl and then brought in Nick Sirianni and won another Super Bowl. What is it about, John Harbaugh that we think is so unbelievably irreplaceable? Like it kind of keeps getting brought up. Like no one in their right mind would fire John Harbaugh after 2023 and roll with Mike McDonald. Like no one would do it. And it's like, why? Like what exactly is the reasoning? It's not like it's 1 or 2 years that it's that was the 4th straight year without success, going back to 2019 and the blunders. So I don't really understand that. I think that line of thinking I find very frustrating.
And you also hear the refrain, apologies to cut you off, but I just want to throw it in there. You also hear the refrain like, oh, well, he'll just you don't think a million teams will be lining up to scoop him up right now? Great. Yeah. And I think he could go somewhere and he could build a program and he could be successful again. And then we'd see about the ceiling of that program, right? We'd see if he could eventually go on to win the Super Bowl, if he got the players that he needed. But the floor just doesn't feel like it's there right now. And to that argument, like, shit, man, you can go all the way back to the Baltimore fucking Colts when Carroll Rosenblum fired Weeb Eubank after a couple of down years, after they had won championships with Johnny Unitas, and he hired a young guy named Don Shula away from the Lions as their defensive coordinator. Because Shula, this guy, you might have heard of him. He won maybe a famous Super Bowl and coached a very amazing quarterback for 30 effing years, whatever it was. And like, that's just sometimes the risk you got to take. And Rosenblum was like that kind of cutthroat type owner that I think Bisciotti has been at times. But as of right now, it feels like maybe he's a little bit too patient. I don't think, for the record, that he is okay with any of this. I think eventually the dam will break, especially if the season continues to go the way that it is. I think this will be it. If they don't turn things around quickly, or if they at least don't show some fight, or Lamar Jackson comes back, or they go on some kind of magical tear. But frankly, like, this was kind of it. I don't care what you were saying before this season. This was a Super Bowl or bust type season. And guess what? If you're going to go and sneak into the playoffs and maybe like win a wild card game, I don't know if that's the best course for this program right now. I think it's either win a Super Bowl or let's get some new blood in there at the top.
And let's be perfectly clear, because we go back to that CVS receipt of an injury report. That better not be an excuse to keep John Harbaugh around, because these issues were here before the injuries started, before Lamar got hurt. And, September was always going to be tough. They had, honestly, the first 6 weeks were going to be tough. They had 5.
That's what's, I think, frustrating us right now. I don't think either one of us or anyone really would be shocked if they were sitting at 1-3. I don't think it would have been the most shocking thing in the world. It is the way they have lost the last 2 games. And of course, how they choked it away in Buffalo.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the way it's gone down. It's the lack of fight. That's what kills me. Right. It's not so much if they lost to Buffalo in a shootout and, the Bills had last ball and they went on a field goal. It's like, sometimes that happens. That's kind of how the Bills have lost to the Chiefs over and over again. I would have been upset. Like, you don't want to lose football games, but it's a hell of a lot different than blowing a 15-point lead in 4 minutes. Then you go to Cleveland and you get your win, which was fine. Like, I mean, they dominated Cleveland. That was what you should have. That was kind of it was a no-win situation. It was either, yeah, of course you're going to beat Cleveland, they suck, or it was, holy shit, you didn't beat Cleveland, they suck. So whatever, move on from that game. But then to go have Detroit at home, Monday Night Football, blackout, like all of the kind of factors. This was like, we're kind of turning it around. We turned it around from Buffalo. We just beat the shit out of the Browns. It's time to launch pad off for the year to go into these tough couple games before the bye. And they just shit the bed. And like I said, they got dominated physically, that's what sits so rough with me. I think you're really nailing it with the point that John's big value has been to create that floor. And that floor is not there right now. Those guys don't look like they were ready to play football 2 weeks in a row. That's unacceptable for the type of coach John Harbaugh is. You go back to, even when we're talking about the injuries, go back and look at Dan Campbell's Lions last year. They had 17 guys on the injured reserve. They still went, 15-2? 15-3, whatever. How many games are there nowadays? I don't even know.
That's one of my big points.
Yeah, and like the Lions flamed out in the playoffs, sure, but I mean, they still got it done every week in the regular season because Dan Campbell's the kind of guy that's going to raise your floor. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Those guys want to bleed with Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell probably walks around bleeding on the sideline, probably gives himself cuts like a little psychopath that he is.
Just drinking thermoses of the darkest black coffee you've ever seen and just eating, just power bars. It's
sludge. It's sludge coffee. Just grinds. But yeah, like that's kind of, I really like your point there because it's been really, really, really tough to see them lose this way. Like it's emasculating. And like I said, it's not the Baltimore Ravens football that we grew up on, quite frankly. Like you go back to the mid 2000s again, when the team was not good, when Kyle Bowler was here, and that defense still, struck fear into opponents, and nobody wanted to come into that building and play the Baltimore Ravens. Right now, I think there's 31 teams that are like, yeah, let's go play the Baltimore Ravens. And that's what fucking drives me crazy.
And that may be the perfect comparison to make, because I was talking about this with my buddy Hodges, who I think is listening to this, or he will after the fact, where it felt like Billick.
Hodges is the beauty. What's up, Hodges?
We do love Hodges. Billick was this very volatile coach, right? Very much went by the whim of his emotion, which was more often than not just jacked to the tits, fired up, ready to fight with the media. And listen, you see that manifest in the second year. They go on this improbable run, and he's got this roster of big personalities that he's managing and makes the playoffs a few more tijust, but overall, like it just, there wasn't the stability there. It feels like this Harbaugh era is almost an elongated now reaction to that, where it's like, we do have the stability. We do have the foundation. We do have the bedrock. And Harbaugh, Bisciotti, DaCosta, they're all very close. They're all very friends. And I know a lot of people throw that out there, that's a big part of why Harbaugh still has a job. I sort of get the criticisms, but I do ultimately feel like Bisciotti still very much wants to win. So that might have been keeping him around longer than he needs to be. But again, I'll keep coming back to it. Like, this is balls to the wall time, man. It's time to like draw your pistols and shoot your way out, because this is not a good situation. And I guess we can get into it now. Lamar, Ian Rappaport putting it out there that he is going to try and play this week. I do not think you want to risk a hamstring injury with the greatest mobile quarterback in the history of the sport. And especially against the Texans defense, who, as you put it, Will Anderson took a nap on the injury report today, but he's probably going to play if I had to guess. A Texans team that is also very much trying to save their season. It's going to be a dogfight. I do think it's going to be Cooper Rush. What's kind of your feel for this game coming up, for the Rams game beyond that? And then how are you going to feel at the bye, depending on how scenarios play out? Because, man, it's going to be tough. I feel like if they're at 2-4, there's a breath of a chance, but it's going to be tough to even get to that, I think.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. Lamar Jackson's definitely not playing. That's one of those gamesmanship things that Eric DaCosta does. Whenever it comes from
Rappaport
Jeff or Rap, it's coming from Eric. If it comes from Josina, it's probably coming from John. And I've been following these patterns pretty closely the last couple of years. Lamar will not play this weekend, unfortunately. It's probably going to be Cooper Rush, but when I was recording with Jay-Z last night, he did make the point that John, out of nowhere, without being prompted, mentioned that John was just like, yeah, or maybe it's Tyler Huntley. So I mean, that was kind of random just for him to offer that without being asked. I still think it's going to be Rush.
You threw this possibility in the group chat. I think that's another gamesmanship thing.
Possibly. Give them something to think about. Now they got to think about 3 quarterbacks rather than 2. It would be random, like super, super random, to just kind of like, Huntley's back on your practice squad at the end of the year, and then now he's your starter. Like, it doesn't really make sense. Spenny mentioned like it's probably going to be Rush. I think I'd side with Spenny on that, but I just found it interesting. Like, when Jeff mentioned that, I was like, yeah, that is kind of random for him to kind of randomly come out with that. But it comes down to, and I was saying this to my wife earlier, because she's like, are you going to watch the game on Sunday? And I was like, we get 17 games minimum a year. Hell yeah, I'm watching the game. Like, I don't really like, there's some times where, it's like a day like last week where it's like, 30 degrees 30 degrees Celsius for my fellow Canadians. And
72 here for context.
72. I never know what to do with Fahrenheit. I get lost. I'll still be watching the game no matter what. I will be cheering for the Baltimore Ravens. But they're in a tough spot. And I say that because, like, this is your ultimate. We're going to come out with Derrick Henry. Like, Derrick Henry's a Baltimore Raven. I don't know if people, remember that, because he has kind of been on a milk cart in the last 2 weeks. But we're going to come out and run Derrick Henry 30 times. We're going to create play action off of that. Cooper Rush is going to manage the game, and we're going to just chip away at the Texans. Like that, if this was a couple years ago, I feel like the Baltimore Ravens would be able to concoct that game plan. And with the way that they're playing, with the state of their offensive line, I have very little confidence that this offensive line is going to come out and dominate the four guys across from them. And you kind of saw it the last couple of weeks. The Ravens, part of their identity before it kind of got away from them, they would come out in heavy and the defense would match them with heavy, and they just run it down their throat anyway. You knew they were going to run the ball. Go back to those fourth downs. Everyone in the building knew Lamar Jackson was running quarterback power, but you still had to stop him. And, a lot of people talking about Patrick Ricard, obviously that is a huge loss. You can't understate that. We're missing our enforcer out there, but at the same time, Patrick Ricard's not going to make Roger Rosengart make his run block. He's not going to make him, Daniel Falele make his run block. He's not going to get Tyler Linderbaum into the second level. It comes down to these five guys up front need to look across the offensive line, want to dominate them, and then do it. And that's what this kind of football game is. Now, you look at the Texans, hell of a pass rush. They got one of the best, probably top 3, top 5 pass rusher duo in Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. They're not as strong against the run, and that's where this becomes interesting to me. Could this be the get right game for this offensive line? So the question is, how do they get there? You go back to see where they've had some success. Get away from some of the delayed handoffs in the backfield. So some of the, they like to run that counter pull where they kind of have the delayed handoff in the backfield, get pullers going. Throw that
It's so infuriating when that gets just blown up right away. I feel like we've seen that happen both weeks in the past 2.
And get it out. Throw your traps out for this week too. You need to be a downhill Greg Roman style, sorry folks, Greg Roman style power football team, because we need to, I found when they've ran power, it's been a little cleaner. Roger Rosengarten's talked about some of the pre-snap communication errors. That's really shown its hand in zone running, where they need to communicate. They need to have that feel together. I'd rather just see more man blocking. Like, let's go out, let's run ISO lead, let's run, wham with an insert. Go back to some of those power concepts, even if you're pulling off 3-4 yards, again, pick away at them, 3 here, RPO pass, slant to Zay Flowers that goes for 5. Now you're in 3rd and 3. That's a lot more manageable than being 3rd and long the whole game. That's the type of game plan that they need to come out with this week. And I put, again, this is going to tell you everything you need to know about this offensive line, because if they come out and lay an egg, there's got to be mass changes. Like, there's a number of guys on this offensive line that, might not be back here next year. And that includes a guy that's really been struggling this year and a guy that's due for a contract, and Tyler Linderbaum. To be sitting here talking negatively about Tyler Linderbaum is a pretty surreal experience because of how much respect I have for him. I absolutely agree that the guard play beside him is going to impact him, especially in the run game. If he can't get Daniel Falele to overtake a one tech off his shoulder and get him into the second level, there's not much Tyler Linderbaum can do about that. But that being said, there's still times where Tyler Linderbaum hasn't executed. Tyler Linderbaum hasn't set up, pass protections well enough. So there's a lot of guys on that offensive line that need to find themselves. And Ronnie probably not playing. I would say I'll be shocked if he plays. He was dragging his foot last week. Like he didn't look right, and he allowed 3 pressures and 11 pass snaps, I think. So he just didn't look like himself. So now you're probably going to Joe Noteboom, who anytime he's had to start, he's kind of struggled. I personally would go with Carson Vincent because, I would go to Carson Vincent just because at least there's some developmental upside there. I don't think you're going to get that high floor at a Noteboom that you'd expect out of a vet that you'd get from like a McCary in previous years, where it's like, yeah, he'll have a couple struggles, but he'll be pretty okay most of the game. And that was the beauty of him. So I guess that's where I'm putting the charge this week. It's that offensive line needs to come out here and they need to grade some roads. Road graders, be sure to subscribe.
Grade those roads. Yeah, I guess I'll leave some of my thoughts for the preview tomorrow, but just overall, man, this is kind of if I could spin this a little bit, and I'll start off from a negative point of view from my guy, Kyle Hamilton, who I think was maybe a little taken out of context, but probably should not have thrown the word spoiled out there about Ravens fans, and classy job by him to apologize for it. I threw it out there that he was a class act, partially in jest. I think people didn't love that either. But if there's one thing
he could potentially be Canadian.
Yeah, listen, it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me based upon that. But the one thing the Ravens fans are kind of spoiled for and do take for granted, especially in this era, is regular season success. It was not right to say that they're spoiled based upon all that's happened within the postseason, the last 7-8 years, whatever. But man, even going into the season, I was like, yeah, I don't really care what happens in the regular season. It's all about what they do in the playoffs. I totally took it for granted. And now here we sit, and they're 1-3. And they're going to have to fight and claw and tooth and nail to get themselves into even a remotely respectable position heading into the bye. I don't even think you could call 2-4 that. So we'll see what happens. But man, like as a fan, are you going to watch the game? I would say absolutely watch the game and just try to remember what it feels like to not have a team that you can just take it for granted that they're just going to roll through the regular season. Difficult schedule notwithstanding, whatever. Like, this is what it's like for a lot of other teams. And I'm not even saying that as like, oh, well, excuse for John Harbaugh. I'm just saying, like, remember in the context that having Lamar Jackson in particular, that is a ceiling raising thing. That is a Super Bowl expectation type thing. But particularly with his absence this week and potentially weeks beyond, like, this is kind of where you got to dig deep as a team. And then as a fan, just kind of try to remember what this feels like, because it's not always just a sunshine and roses, blitz through the regular season, get yourself into the divisional round automatically. It can be a bit of a grind, and I think this is going to be a bit of a grind. So get a helmet and try to enjoy some of it. It's probably not going to be all that much fun over the next couple of weeks, but hey, who knows? Maybe they grind out a win or two, and they do raise
3 going into the bye.
That would be one of the more absurd things that's ever happened. I think I might be with a lifetime contract for John Harbaugh if that happens.
It would be.
I take that back. I am not. I don't actually endorse that, but I was just joking.
You could sell me on 1-5 just as easily as 3-3 with the way this team has played in the regular season. But it was a lot easier to sell that with Lamar Jackson. To your point, like, that is your cheat code, having someone like that. Without him, it's hard to kind of get that much excitement about that potential, though. Like, and we talked about it last night when we recorded. Like, if you're 1-5, are you sellers at the deadline?
I don't even know. Like, people are saying that. It's like, who's going to take like Roquan Smith's contract at this point? Like, who's going to like
contract pending guys?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That's you might be able to sell some of these guys off, but it just doesn't always work like that in the NFL. And if the opportunity does present itself, I'd probably say yes, because like I said, I think that might be better for this organization long term than like let's scrape out 9-8 or 10-7 and then just get our doors blown off in Buffalo again or whatever that would look like.
Yeah. But either way, I'll be excited to watch this game. Again, I'm putting that charge on the offensive and defensive line. They got to step up and they got to control the trenches. That's where this game will be won or lost, like most games are. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. If nothing else, it will be interesting to watch. I don't know if I'd say fun to watch, but it will certainly be interesting. All right, buddy. Well, we got to get you out of here. You got a fantasy hockey league to go and do the draft for, and
the most Canadian thing ever.
Yeah, I was going to say when you said that, I was shocked. Oh my God, Cole has a fantasy hockey draft. Who could have ever seen that coming? But
first overall pick, we're getting McDavid.
Oh, how about that, McDavid? Okay, love that for you.
We got Matsui. Takes me back to knocked up.
I watched that again recently. That still really holds up. That's very good.
It really does.
All Rudd in the O's jersey. How about you? You plug your stuff before we get you out of here.
Absolutely. Road Graders with Cole Jackson. Quiet week over there this week. I actually, what you said earlier, if they're not going to get up, neither am I. That was, so I'm usually doing O-line, D-line breakdowns over there, really focusing on the trenches and the big uglies that I find don't get enough love, but I do know that they get a love on the Jumbo Set pod. That's why me, you, and Spenny are so close. Thanks for having me on in Spenny's absence. We'll be excited to have him back. I'm actually really excited to hear Spenny in the preview in the next couple days because, I've seen from Spenny a bit of a shift. Spenny's usually one of the bigger Harbaugh guys, and that tweet today shocked me. Not in like a negative way. It was just, it really shows where the pulse of the fan base is, that even the staunchest Harbaugh guys are like in that area.
I used to be right in that camp. I think after 2023, I was all in on the hire McDonald as head coach train. And
we all were. It was one of those things that people have come at me with that a number of times. And, I was all over. Like, I would move on from John Harbaugh and roll with Mike McDonald. And now we're kind of seeing the fruits of that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. They found themselves at a crossroad there. It looks like they may have taken the wrong one. They find themselves at another one heading into the next couple of weeks. So we will see where those roads or that road takes us. Or as Yogi Berra would say, if you see a fork in the road, take it. Thank you guys for hanging with us here. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our channel here on YouTube or wherever you get your pods. Leave a comment on the YouTube page. Get the algorithm pumping for us. You can find us on social media at Exit 52 Podcast on X, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. On X, you can find me at Jake Louque. That's Louque. Spenny at Ravens 4 Dummies. That's the number 4. Brian at Barstool Banks. Taylor at Taylor Smythe 10. Thanks to those guys for holding down the instant analysis in me and Spenny's absence. And Eric at EDITTI 22. We appreciate you all. We'll see you again soon for the preview show. And until then, have yourselves a great rest of the week.
Really, really hard, and they execute the system, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
Trust.
He's pretty big trust. Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir.
Right on cue. Hey, right on cue. Hey, let me.